recording has started. I will be posting the recording to our YouTube channel, so hopefully, let me know if you're not okay with that. We can do something. Yeah, so we'll start with introductions. I guess I'll go first, and then just call on somebody else. So, Matt, PM on the VS Code team, working on marketplace extensions, that kind of stuff. I'm really interested to hear what everybody is. Basically, what you're having problems with. That's the thing I'm most interested in. Whether from developing extensions all the way to publishing them, and what the publishing experience is like. And yeah, so Eric.
Yeah, so I'm developer Eric Modio. I'm developer on the VS Code team. Also have the community Slack. So if any of you haven't seen that yet, I'll put the link. I always put the link at the end of the extension authors call post. Yeah, also author of GitLens and other extensions. So yeah, definitely looking forward to hearing how we can make extensions, better and richer, all that sort of good stuff. Let's see, Gustavo.
Okay, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Gustavo Casso. I'm from Brazil, and I have been working with several VS Code extensions. But the extension I am currently developing is Google Drive for VS Code, which integrates the VS Code editor with Google Drive, so you can access your files from inside, upload them directly from the editor. And yeah, I've been contributing to some other extensions on the few past years, but I think that's it.
How about Jose?
Hello, I'm Jose Leon. I'm from Spain, and I'm working right now on an extension that provides, it's like a visual form designer, the same that you can find on Visual Studio for Windows or for Mac, that enables the users to build user interfaces visually, and implements a form designer, a tool palette, or an object inspector to change the properties. So as you can imagine, I'm using a lot of web views. This is my goal with this call, to know what is the, also, if possible, to express my opinion about web views, especially inside the views itself, because that will change radically the interface I'm working on. So that's it.
Nice, that sounds pretty cool. Prakash?
Hi, I'm Prakash. I'm with Salesforce. We have a number of extensions on the VS Code Marketplace that's already out. We are currently working on a new extension to support something called Sockle, which is similar to a SQL-like it's a SQL-like language. So we're trying to have a builder and a text editor for that. So we're using custom editor for that purpose. That's it. And I'm from the Seattle area.
Oh, nice. So you're probably enjoying the smoke too. How about Gordon?
Hi, my name is Gordon Smith. I work for a open VS Code extension. I is for the proprietary language for that platform. In my spare time, I also have another extension, which is a client-side version of the observable HQ runtime, which is very JavaScript-like, but with a few tweaks.
How about Matt B?
Yeah, so I work on VS Code, focused mainly on TypeScript stuff, and then some API work as well. So the Webview API is the main thing. I'll be talking about the new Webview View proposal a little bit later on, but some other parts of the API. And it's been fun to watch how that API has evolved, and interested in hearing your feedback on the API direction and some of the things we have proposed.
Louis? Or is it Louise?
It's the same, doesn't matter. So my name is Luis. I'm from Mexico, and I mainly work on the Salesforce extensions for VS Code. And I'm particularly interested in the changes to the Webview APIs because we have a few features that we're building or we want to build. So any changes there would be good to know. And we're also interested in the flow for surfacing updates on every extension release. And yeah, that's it.
Nice. Miguel.
Hi, yeah, my name is Miguel. I'm also on the VS Code team. I'm the designer on the team, so all things design, UX, icons, colors, all the things. And yeah, today I'm hoping to get some feedback on, surfacing some updates to the user and how to basically bring in that communication from extensions to the user. Yeah. How about Jackson?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Jackson. I'm on the VS Code team. I'm going to be working on the new VS Code welcome experience. So I'm interested in any ideas you have about how extensions might be involved in that, if possible. Yeah.
And Connor.
Yeah, so I'm Connor. I work on VS Code. I mostly work on debugging primarily. So I'm more here as a contributor to someone who writes a lot of extensions. So I think I'm last one. So that's back to you.
Yeah, and let me just check the agenda. I think Miguel, you were first.
Yep.
Is that right? Okay.
Yep. Gordon, did we miss you?
No, I piped in a bit earlier.
All right. No worries. Yeah, I can go first. Let me share my screen. So one of the things that we're kind of been working on is trying to update or have a better experience for extensions communicating with users about updates that inside of the extension. Currently, there's a lot of different ways that you could do this currently, but it's not really a smooth way. You can either do a toast notification, which some users don't like. We're also kind of currently exploring how to improve the overall welcome experience currently. So right now, I think everybody's kind of familiar with the current experience of the welcome screen where, let's see if this will load up, where it's mostly, recent and content that's coded on the left-hand side and then kind of static content that's kind of been sitting on the right-hand side. And so how do we kind of improve this? So in conjunction with that, we're kind of exploring a couple of different layout updates. But today it's mostly focused around the updates portion of that. So you can see on the left-hand side, we sort of have this kind of updated, bigger view for recent folders that makes things a lot bigger to access and more options to access more recent folders, because that's another request we got. I think right now you could only access about 5 or 6 recents from the welcome screen without having to go into the recent menu. So kind of improving that. But we also have this on the right-hand side, this new section called updates that we're sort of still working on and would love to get feedback. So the main idea is that we'd want to be able to find a way that extensions could then communicate either through somehow in the API, whether that's through some sort of markdown file and maybe some indicator in the package.json that indicates what file do you want to surface whenever there is an update. And then bringing that into the welcome screen. So right here, you can kind of see there's a couple different updates. There's features from the extension. So if you were to click see more, we also have another indicator of being able to surface this update. It's kind of similar to the notification dialog that kind of comes up from the bottom right. But instead of it being part of notifications, we're kind of exploring to see there's this new icon in the bottom right. It might be a little hard to see, but it's some sort of icon that indicates that this is where you go and see updates. And so similarly, if you were to clear some of the updates that happen here, those updates would go away. We're still kind of trying to figure out how do we sort of persist some of this data. So if you were to clear this, does it still show up in the home screen? We'd be curious to hear what the feedback is there. And then if I go back, So if I were to click on, you can see the blue links kind of tell you what to click on. But if I were to click on one of these, it would. The idea is that we would then surface sort of the split editor of a Markdown file. So this just is a preview of the settings sync feature. It's like a part of our release notes. That we could sort of have this Markdown file that has like, you can control the content. So you can have, text and images and GIFs, and also links that could potentially go off of here as well. The second thing is also, like, for example, if I were to click on an extension like Azure Storage, we could potentially link directly to the changelog tab inside of the extension view, because we know a lot of extensions kind of use this to update the users on what has changed. And so you'll know the text in here is the changelog. So if I were to, like, let's say you're sort of working on, you're in a file, and then you kind of bring up the updates panel here, or there's a kind of updates little dialog. You'll notice that some of the text here is ellipse. And so if you were to click on this, we can kind of expand and show some additional content without having the user to actually really dive in deep yet. So this is almost like a compromise. We're trying to figure out whether this is a good approach of showing some data, some information without showing everything, because we can't really show everything. So it's almost like, here's a little summary of what has been updated. And if you want to see more, then there's a link to see more. So when you click that, it basically goes to that same view. So curious to get feedback from everybody here about, these different ideas, things that you like, things that you don't like, things that is missing, and things like that. So I'm happy to open it up to everybody.
So are any of you using some sort of like update mechanism where you have release notes that you pop up on update? Is anybody doing that right now?
So I can talk a little bit about that. We actually have a proof of concept that's very similar to what Eric did on his extension. We haven't released it because we're looking for something that gives us this balance of showing some details, but not every time we release, because we release every week, and that might be too noisy for users. So I'm also interested on how much control from the author side would we have on showing this, because maybe we want to just do a summary of, oh, this is what we released on September, but we don't want to have these show up every single time we do a release, which might be 4 times a month.
Okay, that's a good question. Do you know, Miguel, have we thought through what the API looks like, or is this, I think we're still pretty early in just the design phase.
Yeah, that's the kind of feedback we're kind of looking for, is to see if extension authors if you want to have control in terms of when this gets surfaced, and that's sort of one thing that we kind of build into it, is to determine when you would show this sort of update, and then the content that would be inside of there.
We're definitely not sure, exactly how much control over this, because we do want to sort of create a unified experience that's sort of consistent as much as we can. So there may, we're not like they said, we don't have any APIs set yet, but we may do things like follow some Semver stuff. So like point releases may not even show up. Like patch releases may not even show up here, just by default. Whereas if you do, sort of a point release or a major release, then that and you have some content that's in this field or whatever in your package JSON, then the notification will show up, or something along those lines. Because definitely, as a user, I don't think I necessarily want to get notified every time I have a a patch release or something like that. But certainly on a major release, I do, or might, arguably for a point release too. Really just depends on how people version stuff. But again, some extensions, follow, just don't, even pre, that works out. See, we do want to give some control, especially for the Markdown, no images, and then be able to go into change log, a
patch, like a hotfix. I could
maybe
on um, there's something update.
anything. Okay, I think that makes sense.
Gustavo, I saw your name light up. Did you have something?
Yeah, I was thinking about if it would be nice to have an API or something like that to at least point to a custom markdown file, because maybe I would like to show a GIF or a picture of a new feature or something like that on this pop-up. Maybe if I could provide a location of a markdown file, like something like that.
Okay.
Hey guys, another suggestion. I think I share. This is Taras, by the way. I shared it on that issue. I would like to. I know we're not getting paid extensions anytime soon, but I would like to see something along the lines of like, all right, here are the updates, and here are the sponsor links. A link to sponsor on GitHub, Coffee, whatever other networks we use. Would that be possible?
Yeah, that's actually something that we have currently on our iteration plan for this month to explore to see what that could look like. So it's actually assigned to me. So I have yet to create an issue for that, but once I do, I'll make sure and make a comment and mention you, because I think I remember you mentioning that. And I'll just kind of ping you about it, because yeah, we're kind of looking to see what that could look like in the extensions as well. I think that's kind of a separate effort from this one, but I think it's kind of related.
Okay, but I'm just bringing this up because what's new, right? What's new for this extension update? Here's what's new, and here's how you can sponsor this development. I think they both kind of go together. It can be split into separate tickets to work on, but overall, from the user experience, and at least from the extension development standpoint, that's what I would like to see, at least. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely getting it surfaced here, I think is definitely part of that. But you know, the rest of it is a bigger thing of just like in all the places where extensions show up, how does that work and which things do we support and that sort of thing. So, but
I mean, it's not
surfacing it is important somewhere here.
You know, to be honest, I've commented on this in our Slacks, but you know, it's not a money maker. Somebody will buy you a coffee once a month. I actually put a nice orange coffee button in my extensions, but it's kind of fun to have that, I think.
Yeah, I agree, especially right there where it basically says like, here's a bunch of great work from this person or team. You know, if you want to thank them, click.
Yeah, I can imagine something down here as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we are at the halfway mark, so I want to make sure that Matt has some time to show off the WebView stuff. So Matt, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about WebView things. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here. And we'll just kind of take a look at a example WebView extension. I'll walk through the API, talk a little bit about what this is designed for, and then answer any questions that you guys might have. So first off, some of the concepts here. I know a lot of you are familiar with WebViews, but if you are not, a WebView is basically an API that lets you create the equivalent of an iframe inside of VS Code. And using the Markdown preview, for example, this is a WebView that is rendering Markdown that has been converted over into HTML. And you can run scripts, you can do whatever you want inside of this iframe. So your extension fully controls it, and then it can communicate back with VS Code and your extension through posting messages. Now with the current WebView APIs, we are limiting WebViews to just the editor areas. So you can have like the Markdown preview here, for example, or a custom editor that is opening a WebView. The new proposed API, so the Webview View API, is about taking WebViews and putting them into views. And a view would be something that is either shown in the sidebar over here. So for example, like this Explorer section, the outline view, any of those, or it could be down here in the panel. So it could be like in the debug console or output section. Any of those could also be views as well. So we want to let people take their WebViews and put them over here in the sidebar or down in the panel and have that fully customizable content. Some of the possible use cases that we had in mind was like data visualization or more interactive UI. So let's just take a quick look at the extension itself here. This is just the extension from the VS Code extension samples repository, and it contributes a very simple WebView-based view here. You can see that over here, it's called Calico Colors, and here's my WebView-based view. So with the current VS Code APIs, you can contribute views over here. So you can have custom things like NPM scripts, for example, but they have to be based on a tree view structure. And with the WebView-based view one, we can do fancy things like contributing this nice color visualization. We go in and add colors, and we can just click on this to actually go and insert that color into the document if we wanted to, and then go and actually run add color here. Oops. And it'll go and communicate back from our extension to the WebView. So that's the basic idea. I can drag this view around, move it up here. I can move it down to the panel if I wanted to, make this a little larger. So I can just move this thing all around, and the view just moves along. And again, you fully control what is actually displayed inside of here. So now let's take a look and actually see how this is being implemented. So if you are familiar with the tree view API, it is actually using that. So the first part of a web view is the package JSON here. You have to tell VS Code that this view even exists in the first place. And that is information that VS Code needs to activate your extension. So here in the contribute section here, we're telling VS Code we are contributing a new view. The only difference from contributing a standard tree view is that you are actually saying that here is a web view that we are contributing. So we need to tell VS Code we're contributing a web view specifically. We give it a unique ID that is used internally, and that's how we identify the view. And then a display name, which is the human readable name that's actually displayed in the editor. So this is just the static contribution point that VS Code needs to know that this extension provides this view. Now, the other part of the API is how you actually go. And let me just also point out that we have this activation event called onView. And this is saying that whenever the view needs to actually be displayed, the view needs to be displayed. Now, when your extension is activated, the main API that it needs to use is actually the register WebView View Provider API. And this binds that ID, which if I go here, it would be the same ID we were looking at before in the package JSON file. It binds it to a provider. And a provider in this case is pretty simple. So let's just go look at the color view provider here. It's implementing this Webview View Provider interface. And if we navigate to that, you can see that there's only a single method you need to implement. What this method is basically defining, it's saying when we need to show this view, go to the extension and resolve the view. So it gives you this Webview View object, and your extension is responsible for resolving it. In most cases, that means in all of the HTML, hooking up whatever event handlers you have on this Webview View object, and doing whatever else you need so that this view can actually be displayed to the user. In terms of what this Webview View object is itself, it is just a new interface that contains a web view. So it's very similar to the existing Webview panel class if you've worked with that before. So you have all of these properties on here, and the main one that you'd be using to set the HTML or communicate with your web view, for example, would be this web view property here. And then you get those same properties, so you can do like set the HTML, you can do post message, receive message, all those things on the web view itself. And then there are some helper methods and other things that are view specific in this Webview View class here. So let's just take a quick look and see what the extension is doing with this API. So here is our implementation of Resolve Webview View. We save off the web view that we're interested in. We go and configure some options for it, such as enabling scripts. This is probably familiar if you've worked with the existing Webview API. We set that initial HTML that's going to be displayed to the user, and then we hook up the event listeners. And at this point, VS Code knows that it can then go and actually display that web view to users, and everything will be good. In terms of how you communicate from your extension with the web view, it is using that same post message API that you are used to on normal web views. So we have like on did receive message here. And if I go and I find, here for example, this add colors method here, it is allowing you to go and post a message to the web view. So you can use these APIs to communicate from your extension to the web view, and then back from the web view to your extension. And it should be very familiar if you've worked with web views before. So that's the quick overview of the Webview View API. As I said, we're kind of thinking about use cases for like data visualization. I know Connor's been working on a cool profiler for the debugger that actually shows real-time performance information over in the sidebar as you're debugging a program. But other interesting use cases would be maybe you have existing UI of some sort that's displayed in the editor area, and you want to actually move that over into the web inspector. Something similar, it could overview of the web. Just like allowing you to go views over here, enable for all views, view-based views. I think there's a pretty popular issue that's tracking that, so you can search for that in the repository.
Yeah, it has 500 thumbs up, so I'm kind of curious if is this you kind of just started with the activity bar, and hopefully after a few iterations you're gonna add the right sidebar?
Like I said, this API is mainly designed for augmenting our existing views. The proposal or the ability to show the views on both sides is really something that we'd want to enable for all views, so it'd be a larger effort. My expectation is that if we enabled it on both sides, these Webview views would just work as expected in that case.
Okay.
I'd like to say I think it's incredible. Congrats for this great work. I think it will be very, very nice. And I would like to ask if you guys think about maybe adding a Webview view to actually a web view to that new what's new pop-up, or to provide a rich interaction with the what's new pop-up or something like that.
I'm sorry, what, say it again?
Would it be possible to, on that what's new pop-up that we were talking about before, could we maybe add a web view to that so the extension could provide a richer experience on the what's new pop-up through an API or something?
Oh, do you mean like a normal web view where it's displayed in the editor, or a Webview view specifically?
Actually, I think it's a normal web view.
Okay.
You mean in the little update pop-up, or just when you click on the update pop-up, open a web view?
When you click on the update pop-up, there are several extensions that have been updated, for example. And when you click on the specific extension, that extension could provide a web view to show something different for the user instead of just the basic changelog.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a possibility. And I mean, we were talking, that content is in theory going to allow links. So you'd actually be able to allow a command link, and then from the command link, open your web view or do something there. But we're still unsure on how far we'll go with that on the outset. Because we do want to keep it a somewhat consistent experience.
Okay.
I'd like to second what was said there. Having the ability to display web view in the bottom panel in particular is something which is going to be huge for our extension. And I'd just like to say thank you for that. A couple of observations on it. One, it really does feel like, because I create a new panel holder to place the web view in, it really feels like we should have access to that panel holder so we can update its title prior to the web view being resolved. And we've also got this little sort of chicken and egg scenario where say you were displaying in that web view in the bottom panel extended information about the file the user clicked on in the Explorer tree, as a hypothetical. If the web view hasn't been resolved, we've got this sequence of events. The user clicks on the file. We have to trigger the web view to show. We then have to wait for it to resolve, for the initial page to load its internal JavaScript. Typically, that would then message back to the web view controller, at which point it can say, well, it's actually this file we were looking at, and here's the extended information I'd like you to render. And that process is quite different to if the web view was already resolved and the user was just clicking on a different file in the tree, then it's just a matter of shooting a message to the web page. So it's almost like we should be able to prime the web view to an empty, without loading the web page, but have it all set up ready to receive that first notification. That was one comment. Now, it's the fact it's there is a huge win, and working around these things is not a problem. So I don't want any of this to delay. The other observation I had was, and it's kind of a minor thing, but I wanted my web view to look and feel a bit like VS Code. So I started using the Fluent UI, the Microsoft Fluent UI React one. And one of the first things I did is I wrote a little theme generator based on the bunch of styles that are getting passed in to the web view via VS Code in the outer frame. It'd be nice to sort of make something official with the Fluent UI team. Because it works really well once you have the theme picking up. And I'm only randomly picking a few of the key colors, but if the VS Code published a primary color, a secondary color, and whatever the Fluent UI language team use, then it would make creating web views that look correct very easy.
Yeah, that's something that we have thought about in the past, is would there be an official, like a CSS package that makes any buttons inside of a web view, for example, look more like how we recommend VS Code makes their buttons look. I don't know. I don't think this would be something that we ever build into VS Code, but this could certainly be something that an extension could then go and take a dependency on, and this might be something that we look into more in the future. I think there might be an exploration out there, but I don't know if it's official. So you can check that out. It is something we thought about for normal web views as well, and with Webview Views, the need becomes even more important, and you make it look like normal VS Code, and so your extension doesn't really stand out when it's over in this sidebar panel.
Yeah, and my experience was, with a few minor tweaks, just getting the pivot in the Fluent UI, which I wouldn't be that familiar with, but just getting it to look similar to the tabs within VS Code was relatively straightforward. But just having the coloring and matching the theming alone, if VS Code published a primary, a secondary, these things which Material UI use, which they're kind of fairly common things, it would be very beneficial, but relatively minor.
Hey guys, there are actually a bunch of tickets in VS Code repo for this coloring. I think in our initial authors feedback call, we discussed something like UI toolkit, but nothing based on React or anything like that. Make it pure web components. For things like you need a toolbar in a web view, that was something I suggested, because even though custom editors are cool and all that, but there are things that we're doing in especially database web views that you can't just do it with context menus and things like that. So if there was, and there are VS Code styles, I've used them, they're handy. But if there was kind of like an official CSS/web components toolkit to do like a simple ribbon top UI toolbar in WebView, I think it would be helpful to just keep things for out there.
Okay.
Yeah, we definitely hear the feedback on that. It is something that we want to be cautious about, like taking ownership of, because that is not a trivial thing to then be maintaining and having everybody then depending on. So we definitely we've thought about it, and we encourage extensions right now to try to make their web views look good, but we do give you that freedom if you want to deviate in terms of the design right now. But we will think about that more.
Okay, Matt, but you're kind of halfway there already, because we have those VS. Some of them I know other developers do, so I just kind of wanted to mention that.
We can. I know there was some. I'm pretty sure there's an issue open, at least for the toolkit, and there's also an exploration. I believe, Miguel, that there was one team looking at what we can do for a design toolkit around that sort of thing. So we can post that too in the notes from the meeting.
Yeah, we did have an internal team that we had already designed and styled the components, at least from the design side, and are kind of looking to see if we can get somebody internally build it. So I think there is some progress. I don't know when. There's no ETA on that when that would happen though, but that's just specifically for that Fluent toolkit.
Yeah, we can pick that up and just get a status. So is there any more feedback on the web views before we?
I have one question. It's about the communication between web views. I mean, at this moment, what I imagine is that the extension itself should be the broker between all the views. That is, a web view will send a message to the extension, and the extension will need to communicate to another web view, right? I don't know if it will be possible to make the web views talk between themselves without, that circle. I don't know if that is possible or not.
Yeah, no, it's not possible today. The reason is that web views are they're isolated, so they are like their own little process or little iframe essentially, and they can't reach out and find here are the other web views that exist. So right now the web views always VS Code. If you're doing a lot of data, that actually might become a problem. Like if you're posting a huge amount of data between your extension and the web view, that could eventually become a problem that would be solved by letting web views communicate. But for now, I think we're restricting that all the communication has to go through the extension, and then the extension can be the router in these cases.
Okay. Okay.
Hey,
Another.
Matt. So
Oh, sorry.
this actually came up a few times where we're looking for some interop between extensions, like some kind of data bus where there's a separate API that does it. Is whoever's doing visual debugger, where can we dump all that data into a data preview? No, there's not really a good mechanism for doing that unless you put in global state and other things. So down the road, and I know other extension developers brought up in Slacks where, okay, we want to separate things. We want to have a couple extensions, but we do want to exchange data between them. It's hard to do with commands. It's not a good way to do it with global state. What's the solution? Some kind of channel data bias, yes, sockets, however you want to do it. Probably worth discussing down the road.
So I think for that specific use case, we do either recommend that you can use a command to trigger a specific action, or if you're wanting a more proper API, your extension can actually return that to other extensions. So you can do things like making sure the extension that you depend on has been activated and all of those type of things. You do, like if you wanted this to interact with the WebView in some way, it would still have to go through the VS Code extension. So let's say you wanted some data to be displayed in a specific WebView type display. Your extension could return an API that says display this data. The other extension would just give you a string or something, and then your extension, the provider would come along and just render it into a WebView.
In a simple word, that works, but when you need to pump lots of data, you can't just pass, via your URI parameters, all of that data. So there needs to be something better than that.
There's nothing stopping you in your extension firing up a mini server on a specified port and do all your communications directly with that.
True, but won't be better if there was a unified API for some kind of extension data bus where we can publish messages for other extensions to consume.
That I think is really the purpose of the VS Code extension API, because it thinks about things like I mentioned, extension activation and dependencies and these type of things, which we've already kind of thought about this, and it would handle commands would be another way to actually do this. So I think we don't necessarily want a WebView specific thing for that until we have a good reason for saying that the VS Code API is not going to work for this.
Okay.
I have a question. So
sorry.
when you move the WebView around, let's say from sidebar to the bottom panel, do you get any notification so that we can re-render the contents or restyle based on the location the WebView is in? So with the current proposal, there is no indication that it is in either the sidebar or the panel, but that is something we're considering adding. You do get notifications when the user goes and collapses the WebView, so you get an on change visibility. So you can respond to that. Your extension can update itself however it needs there. You also get a notification if the user goes and actually hides the WebView. So that would be like right-clicking in the sidebar and saying, don't show this WebView anymore. And that fires a dispose method. I think you can look at the width of where you're rendering yourself and kind of change the display that way inside your WebView itself. But we will, I think, probably consider adding a location property or something like that would sort of like the active column in the WebView panel API that lets you check and say, where am I actually being rendered instead of VS Code? That's something we'll probably be looking into at some point. Thank you.
Yeah, and you can use like resize observer and stuff too to adapt, or just breakpoints, CSS breakpoints too, just to automatically adapt. But yeah, there will be sometimes that it will still be nice to know whether or not you're in a horizontal panel. I mean, yes, you could sort of glean it by sizing sometimes, but it is sometimes nice to know the difference.
Yeah, and I think Connor opened an issue that, sorry?
No, go ahead.
Connor has an issue open that's actually tracking that. It might not be something that makes it into the first version of the API, but we could add it later on.
Matt, in the current API, can like a tree view, can you update the title of the view after the fact?
Yes. So once your web view has been resolved, you can go and update the title. What Gordon was mentioning is that your extension needs to actually be activated and the web view needs to be resolved before you can go and edit the title. So we have to kind of find the right balance between eagerly activating your extension all the time and letting you actually have that amount of control. So that's something I'm thinking about right now is, do we have the right balance right now with the activation events? Does there need to be a wrapper class or something that would let you update the title before the web view is resolved? Those type of things.
Yeah, and there is a slight weirdness at the moment in the bottom panel. If you close VS Code and reopen, it remembers the last title you set way before your web view has been resolved, which is, in my case, is potentially completely invalid at that point. And just, again, it comes back to, it feels like we should have our own panel container, have access to it, so that when it gets invoked without the web view in it, that we can clean up that sort of history, if you like. But again, it's a minor, and I'll open an issue for that specifically.
Yeah, it sounds like it might be a separate bug. So I would expect it to go back to your package JSON title.
Oh
Yeah.
no, we specifically updated it to use the to cache the title. So that is what it was designed to do.
Oh, really? Okay.
But I can see that if you're browsing around and let's say your web view title is based on your current file, that might not be what you expect.
Yeah, especially if you've come into a completely different workspace. I'm not sure where you're persisting it, but.
Yeah. So we're at 4 minutes.
I have one last question, if possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, in my case, my web view is a big React application, so I'm heavily depending on the retained context when hidden. Does the Webview views support also that, or I need to use the state or?
Yep. So they support both. We encourage you to make sure that, like, if your extension can, don't use retained context when hidden, especially for something more minor, like if it's just displaying UI components. Right. But if you absolutely need to, it's like some really complex data visualization and you can't rebuild it quickly, then you can use retained context when hidden. And that should make it so that when you collapse the web view, it is still kept around in the background. You expand it, and it just shows that same web view again.
Okay, thank you.
But if the user actually fully hides it, right, then you'll get the dispose and it'll tear it down.
Yeah, so if the user goes in and like says, I don't want to see this view at all anymore, then we will call dispose and get rid of things there. Cool. All right, helpful feedback, so thank you.
Awesome work.
Yeah, so we have 3 minutes. We're basically at time. Is there any additional feedback people want to share before we wrap up?
There was one thing I'd like to advocate for, which is just some minor improvements to the API around the launch configurations. Specifically, if the user clicks on the debug tab and then changes which launch config they're interested in, if we could get an on did change notification for that, that would be very useful. And then the mirror image of that being able to set what the default launch config is via API. There is an issue open for it. There's not a whole heap of thumbs up, but it feels like a quick win, especially given the launch configuration is shown in the status bar, and you can click on it and stuff there.
Right. Anything else? Anybody? Anything at all?
For just as quick as I can just go through some things, just highlights to mention super fast. Just some things that have shipped recently on APIs to look at. We have the new authentication provider stuff. So if you're trying to authenticate with GitHub or Microsoft Auth, there's new APIs. So look in the authentication namespace off the VS Code API, and you can actually, do a whole sign-on flow to get access to those things. And so if you're trying to do something to integrate with GitHub or that kind of thing, that works great. There's a new in operator that you can use in when clauses, which basically gives you the ability to take a key and resolve that value of that key and look up that value in another key's set of values. So like an array. So like, if you wanted to only have your menus on certain file names, You could contribute a context value that's an array of those file names, and then look up in there if things are supported based on those keys being there. So it's powerful. Terminal links shipped last iteration. So I won't show a demo because we're so out of time, but you basically can define, just like kind of like in the editor, you can define areas of the text that should be linkified, and then you can execute commands or anything you want based on those links. So it's a great little experience. I've implemented the next version of GitLens will have that, so you can click on commits in the terminal and branches in the terminal and pop up and get richer information over that. Custom editors, as Matt mentioned, is taking web views to the editors. Very big feature. So if you're doing stuff there. Color theme API, we have a little bit of access to at least the theme. We don't have color access yet, but you can at least get the theme, light and dark information. You can now, the progress indicators API supports putting indicators on views. So if your view, whether it's a Webview View or tree view, if it's loading data, you can do, using the progress APIs, you can say that it should show up on the view. So you'll get a little bar there. And then some proposed things that are shipping, well, very likely shipping this iteration are submenus. So you can see them in the product for like under the Git menu, menu, there's submenus. Extensions can now create them. So there's like a new contribution point of submenu. You define that, and then you could just add your normal menus to those menus. So it's really, turtles all the way down, as many submenu stuff as you like. So you can do some really cool things to collapse things up there. And you can also have submenus on the commands themselves. So like, in a tree view, you might have a button there. You can actually have that be a menu directly, a submenu directly. Tree views are going to support markdown hovers for their tooltip. So you'll be able to actually do much richer tooltips for tree view items in the views. So you can have links and basically the same things that you could do in editor hovers, you can do in the tree view tooltips. And then Matt's with the Webview views. So that's some of the good stuff coming in. Keep an eye on. Also, two things I just wanted to mention. If people haven't known, we have codicons, which are you can use throughout the product. So it's a set of icons that are built into the product. You can use them in menus, views, many places in the hovers. So take advantage of them. We're also open to adding new codicons, and views also have now that users can move views around. You can contribute your own icon to the view itself. So you can, you used to be able to just contribute to the activity bar container, but if somebody drags your view out, you can have an icon specified in the JSON package JSON for that view. So that would be the icon that would show up on the activity bar. So we definitely encourage you to add view icons to the views, so users do take advantage of that. They get a better experience than a sort of like a default icon. That's all.
That part is nice. By the way, theoretically, I do get reports from some developers using the latest VS Code version that either the view restore, I believe it's on restoring the view with web panel serializer, fails to load, potentially related to our updates on the VS Code resource Webview site. I've had a few issues, devs logged it. I kind of looked at it every time I try it, asked others to try it. Hard to reproduce. So it's kind of an odd bug and very sporadic, but just kind of want to mention it.
All right.
Hey, Eric, Luis had a question about auth providers. Are we planning to bring any additional auth providers beyond GitHub and Microsoft?
I don't know if we are, but so like what has shipped is the consumer side of the auth providers. There is a producer side of the auth providers, but that API is still in proposed. So that hasn't shipped yet, but definitely if you do want to contribute an auth provider, that is something that we want to support. And if you have comments, you can certainly go and try it out today. the GitHub and the Microsoft are using those proposed APIs to implement them. So yeah, definitely give us feedback on that as well. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure which iteration the producer ones will ship, but they are there.
Cool. All right. I'm going to call it there. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We'll see you all again next month.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.